Hello. Probably everyone has experienced uneasiness when giving feedback. And most of us remember how hard it is to listen to critical feedback. We as consultants have been studying feedback in organization for many years and found out that despite the best efforts and a lot of good advice, feedback remains a perennial problem.
It seems that people in organizations spend a lot of time talking about feedback, and there are a lot of methods that have been evolved for how we do it properly, what rules we should follow. But our observation has really been that no matter how well people seem to follow those best practices, there are at least six challenges that seem to remain. And we've identified those as three killers of offering feedback and three killers of receiving feedback. That's what we'd like to talk about today. And we're working on evolving a really radical and new approach to thinking about feedback that enables us to take these challenges seriously and work with them in a different sort of way. So, Thomas, why don't you tell us about those first three killers of offering feedback?
The first killer has been studied by Dunning and Kruger, and it is basically this overconfidence we get when we learn about something before we actually realize it is a little bit more complex. So, in a feedback situation, we are inclined to say things with a lot of confidence, even though we initially do not have a full knowledge. The second feedback killer when you are giving feedback is called fundamental attribution error. It is a situation when you are assessing somebody else who is not perhaps behaving the way you approve. You are initially trying to explain that by his own internal choices, while if you are doing something that is not exactly right, you are very quick in explaining that away by circumstances that forced you to do such and such thing. And probably the third one would be retrospective coherence. Retrospective coherence is our ability to remember things clearly as having a cause and effect, where if we are in the mid of a difficult situation, we are rarely able to predict how it will develop. So when we are giving feedback, we are already using this retrospective coherence, thinking that it was clear for the person in the very moment as well, which is rarely the case. So we are assuming a knowledge that the other didn't have. And all three together create a situation where the feedback giver seems to be overconfident, blaming, and all knowing, which is not really a good start to give feedback with.
So alongside that, we are also identified three killers for the feedback receiver, which are obviously related. And the first of those is the identity threat. So there's something about how when the way we recognize ourselves seems very different to the way that other people are recognizing us, so we feel misrecognized, it can cause an incredible amount of anxiety because it also seems to represent a threat of exclusion or even possible annihilation in some ways. And that can make us feel very, very defensive when people are offering us feedback. The second killer has to do with diversity of perspective. So obviously there is a real diversity of perspective. Otherwise, we wouldn't need to give each other feedback quite so much. But very often when people give feedback, they give it as if they have a monopoly on the truth, as if they're somehow offering something which is objectively true. And when that differs from the way that we see things from our own perspective, that can feel very unfair and very untrue, and that can stimulate some strong emotional reactions. The third killer has to do with unclear relationships. So very often, it's very unclear why people are giving us feedback. Are they trying to help us? Are they trying to coach us? Are they assessing us or measuring us? Or are they perhaps even trying to control us, to discipline us, to punish us in some cases? And I think that this is really exacerbated because feedback is often given from a position which is very naive about the nature of power relations. So it's given as if we're equals, but of course we aren't equals. There's a constantly shifting political landscape in which feedback is always given, and that makes it much more complex than it seems on the surface.
So, thinking about feedback for many years now and identifying these 6 killers made us realize that we need to depart from the traditional way feedback is seen and develop something radically different. And we have been doing that and standing on the shoulders of giants such as Robert Keegan with his initial idea of deconstructive feedback. But we are adding complex responsive processes. We are drawing on nonviolent communication. And we are using the work of Dave Snowden, Kinefin, and his SenseMaker to do further research. And we are as well leaning on some psychoanalytic and group psychoanalysis sources to round up our thinking. And all that has resulted in our very special way of understanding feedback and how it might work better.
And we're really excited about sharing this with a bunch of practitioners, of leaders or consultants who are really interested in thinking seriously and changing the way that they give and receive feedback. And so we've developed a new 4-month deconstructive feedback in-depth course. And I think this is really something quite new. I'm not really aware of anything like this happening anywhere else. 4 months in-depth focused just on this challenging issue of feedback, where there's going to be a lot of teaching, but also a program deeply rooted in your own practice. And so a lot of group coaching and real life measurement of what you're doing in your experimentation using Cognitive Edge's SenseMaker tool. So I think this is a really exciting opportunity, and I hope that you'll join us.
Thank you. See you there.